Good afternoon, folks. We're waiting for the audience to file into the room. Thanks for joining us today. We'll get started in a few seconds here, maybe about a minute or so.
Brandon, I think this is the awkward silence before we begin here, as the awkward silence of a good conversation.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us. I'm Brandon Freed, Executive Director of the Air Forwarders Association. I'm coming to you today from Washington, D.C. And welcome to the evolution of air freight from manual to intelligent operations. Today's session has been sponsored by Captain Cargo, and I would like to thank them. Basically, today we're going to cover a lot of topics. The speed advantage, why minutes matter in air freight in today's air freight marketplace. The first quote often wins the business regardless of price, while your team spends hours manually retrieving rates, calculating margins, and formatting quotes. Your competitors are winning shipments with automated intelligence. So today's exclusive panel discussion focuses on how AI-powered automation is transforming air freight operations, helping forwarders respond 4 times faster, win 40% more business, and scale without adding headcount. And I'll tell you what we're going to cover today. The evolution gap, why some forwarders are pulling ahead while others seem to be falling behind, the operational transformation, how to eliminate rate sheet chaos and quote in seconds, margin optimization, using intelligence to maximize profitability without sacrificing winning rates, the implementation realities, real world experiences, and measurable outcomes, and the future outlook, where air freight technology is headed, and of course, how to stay ahead. So let me introduce our panelists today. First of all, from Captain Cargo, we have Chris Condon, who's the founder and CEO. He's been pioneering AI-powered solutions for air freight quoting. Chris, thank you for being here today. And I'm going to move over to a face most of as Brendan O'Dowd is the founder and CEO of 7L Freight. He's been leading rate repository solutions across air and truck and has done a phenomenal job over at 7L, which is now a Freightos company. He can talk about that later. And then we have Ben Cozy, who is the time critical logistics executives from Airspace, which is really revolutionary time critical logistics. What they have done has been a switch in our business. So I'm anxious to talk to him as well. And then Jeremy Lovelady, who goes back with us a long time, is the CEO and president of F2F International, which is balancing traditional expertise with technology. So before we get started, some housekeeping. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, not the chat in the chat box. There's no Q&A here, so we don't have to get that confused. And then we're going to be monitoring those. I have Michelle with me also. Hello, Michelle. Thanks for joining us today. And we'll be monitoring those as the conversation continues. We'll ask questions. So let's talk about some key themes here today. We're seeing a pivotal shift in air freight operations, and that's this move that's going from manual to time, which are the manual time-consuming processes, all the way over to this intelligent automated solution environment, which has been a real change. I've been in the business I had hair back then, so a long time ago, and I've seen just tremendous change. And these panelists represent specific or different facets of the industry. So we've brought in traditional freight forwarding expertise, new freight forwarding expertise. I go to Jeremy, he's been around this for a while, and I go to Ben, he's been around for a while, but more a relative newcomer to the industry. And then, of course, we have the solutions providers as well. And we're going to talk about the practical impact on operations and customer service and how we can get the competitive advantage and how that comes into play here. Let's talk about the current state of air freight operations. And Chris, since we're on your dime today, I want to ask you, what are the critical pain points that you observed in air freight operations that led you to develop Captain Cargo? And by the way, tell us really quick about Captain Cargo, because You're affiliated with another company,
Yeah, so
Aircon AI, and give us the
yeah,
whole rundown.
yeah. So Aircon is the parent company of Captain Cargo. It's really because it's a multi-prod approach in terms of trying to solve a problem that I had when I was a small to medium-sized freight forwarder myself. And the reality of it is there's lots of different solutions out there. There's lots of different great things out there, but how do you get those all together so the small to medium sized guy can compete at scale? That was our whole mission when we started Aircon, was how do we support folks to compete against multinationals or compete against whoever they have. And it's always for air freight, it's always the chicken or the egg conversation, right? You got to have the freight to get the rate, and you got to have the rate to get the freight, right? So that's really this pain that we're trying to solve, is how do we let people compete at scale if they want to compete? Because we truly believe that people do business with people.
Okay. And walk us through real quick for those who are not familiar, give us a layman's perspective on what you do.
So currently, Captain Cargo is a quoting agent. So it actually does the work. It uses your rates, it uses multiple rate repositories and whatnot that you may have, or whatever your network is.
Yeah.
And we respond to your customers in real time in less than 60 seconds. We'll provide a rate based on your margin, your rate, your whatnot. And then we also have a backstop if you don't have a network of a wholesale network around the world that can do those services for you.
So let's say an email inquiry is coming in from my customer. It's being, how is
So
it being fed to you?
yeah, so we'll digest that email. We'll obviously, with a structural data with LLM, we'll take that
LLM, what's that?
it's basically, think of OpenAI or ChatGPT, right? It's reading the English language or whatever language.
Is that like a learning model? Is
Yeah,
that
it's a
what that
large language model is the
large language
term.
model?
Think of it as an offshoot of AI. So you think of ML or machine learning, which is more about predictive analytics and those type of things. And think of LLM as a way to digest just data and structure the data into a way that we can digest it.
Okay, I'm going to ask some real basic questions today. I've still got a VCR over here that's blinking 12 because I haven't figured out how to fix the clock.
Yep.
So you'll have to take it slow with me, and so we understand exactly what we're talking about. Okay, and then you'll answer the customer. You'll go back to the customer.
Yep. Yeah. And we responded back with the customer with your margins, your whatnot with it. And then it allows you to have the data to know why you're not missing or why you're not winning business. For example,
Okay.
if you have your win rates, your percentage, carriers, all that information.
All right. So Jeremy, you've been in this business a long time. You and I go back on the freight forwarded side of things. Now the Air Forwarders Association's got a lot of members and various categories of members, and we have those who are technically are automation adept, who have embraced technology. And then we have some that kind of embrace technology, and then we have some who still have this electric typewriter, and that's what they do. That's their technology. So, Jeremy, you've been around this for a while. How are you using this Captain Cargo? And from your perspective, what challenges, if you are, has it been solving?
Yeah, I'll give you a short answer. We are. What it's been able to do for me, first and foremost, is automate my quoting. The quoting process takes a while. To do it diligently takes even longer. A lot of that time spent checking rates or validating rates. Are these rates still good that I have? We're able to get that whole process down to, like Chris said, a minute. From there, we can move into the booking process, and they can get all the way to the destination door to where I have my teams that handle it from there. And this is a process that I'm used to handling by myself. And then when it gets, a lot of cargo, we get a lot of manual processes that pile up. So all the little automations really do help me stay on what I need to, which is customer satisfaction, customer acquisition. And I'm not here waiting for that Lufthansa rep to finally get back to me to validate that rate.
Yeah. So when Captain Chris does, I'm going to call him Captain Chris. When Captain Chris does his job, sends it over to you, time wise, give me a sense. Is it minutes? Is it seconds?
Yeah, it's less than a minute. And we have two different applications. One is I keep it internal, right? And we use it just like a tool to help my quoting process. The other is we've actually introduced it to a few key customers who are emailing directly to it, get their rates back, and can move to that booking process. And then I can review from a data standpoint, are they satisfied? Do they prefer just one airline or the other? Are they still wanting the cheapest rate, and grow from there?
All right. Once this transaction happens, are you aware it's going on? And if so, how much time are you giving? I don't want you to give up any trade secrets,
Yeah,
but sooner or
sure.
later, we're in a people business. Is someone calling the customer up and said, had that look? Is it something
Yeah.
we can do today?
No, the best part about this is they've made it look like the same process that's been happening. So we're still coordinating with the shippers, getting certain documents ready for export. We're still booking the pickup. We're still getting alerted of that booked pickup, of the tender to the airline, of the typical airline tracking. So those usual emails I would get from 3 or 4 different places, whether or not I had to chase them down, are
Yeah.
now coming automated. And then we can decide what to do with that information if we want to just forward that to our customer, if they want to subscribe to, say, certain events, and grow from there.
Chris, did this technology exist 5 years ago? Is this
It
new?
did not. Yeah. So the LLM, or the large language modeling, is really
Uh-huh.
about 2 years old. And that really allows us to connect to all these different things relatively fast and easily, right? For example, back in the day, old EDI, then it became a flat file, then it became an email, and then it became API. This is just the next variation of communication.
Okay. Ben Cozy, I call you a relative newcomer to the business, but that doesn't mean you're not making tremendous strides leveraging technology. Give the audience a sense as to what airspace does and what your position is in the market now.
Yep. So no, I think you're right. Certainly within the panel, the newcomer, I've been at Airspace a little bit over 5 years, which was my entry into air freight. I was actually doing rail freight before that. So definitely different speeds here. And we focus specifically on what we call time critical shipments. So we initially started in organs for transplant, aircraft parts, and now have expanded to really anything like this group knows, like what you consider expedite. That's where our focus is. And so we were founded, like I said, almost 10 years ago and built on a tech stack that was largely leveraging more traditional AI. Like Chris said, this generative AI is much more recent. It's something we're leveraging now too, and we can get into that later. But we built what we focused on and why the company was founded was our CEO and founder had owned a courier business and basically saw all of these consistent mistakes that happen, whether that be through the airlines or especially through the driver partners, right? We all have wheels on the ground that we're managing, and we were built around tech to try and address these problems. So I think in a nutshell, airspace, like we provide a quote up front, we provide a route right away to our shippers, and then we're actively soliciting drivers that are running our airspace app. We have about 2,000 drivers out there running it. And I'll end by saying like that traditional AI, so think the classification models that are determining based on the inputs here what route should be taken. But then once the shipment is en route, we're tracking a driver and saying, are they going the right direction? Are they going into what is historically a long tender line? So they should hurry up, or we should build in buffers there to make sure that they make the line.
And so this cadre of drivers, I'm assuming these are the agents that a lot of freight forwarders traditionally use, yes? Or maybe not.
A mix. We do partner with some of the more traditional agents, and we do have a number of them running our app as well. We're actually like actively building a separate app for them
I
that
see. So if I run, so a big courier or trucking company might use your app, but if I'm Fred's Freight and I'm a one truck operation, I'm sure in Keokuk, Iowa or something, am I on your app? Is that how
Yeah,
I'm
good
communicating?
question. So as we all know, like it goes from very big player, and that's the ones that, as I mentioned, we're building a separate thing for now.
Yeah.
We'll table that. Others have similar things just to make it easier for them. But like Fred's Freight, we have a lot of Fred's Freights in our system, and we
Mhm.
onboard them as airspace commanders who are actively running our app. The bulk of them, though, are independent contractor drivers that oftentimes actually do come from agents. We try to strike the balance. We're not poaching drivers from our agent partners, but like folks who are familiar in the courier space who are running the airspace app. So think of the vast majority of the drivers as like true independent contractor drivers. But then
Yes.
we also do work with some of your bigger players.
Okay. So you air freight commanders, airspace commanders, do you use Captain Cargo? Is that, do you have a type of affiliation?
We don't yet, but what I would say is like Chris and I, as part of getting together for this, are going to have some discussions because airspace started in the US, went international about 4.5 years ago, and we're continuously pushing into new markets. And I think those markets where our air freight rates Our air freight rates are very competitive in the US because we've grown there. We're okay there, if you will. But if we move into a new market, I can't remember exactly how it was said earlier, but like you got to get the freight to get the rate to get the freight. Like we don't have the rate yet in name your country. And so like we're looking forward to partnerships with folks like Chris on things like that to help us be competitive out of the gates to help us expand.
The area of when you moving medical organs and medical supplies, that's pretty much what brought you into the dance, as I recall. And maybe you're into other things now. But is that a high quote demand environment? Or once they trust you, you have the business, but you can't fail? What's that environment like?
So that specific environment, I would say that the folks that are coming to us, the organ procurement organizations in that case, or even like think medical device customers, that shipper is logging into the airspace portal to place an order versus it out for quotes. We don't think in most cases that specific space is going out for quotes. So we actually have their rates loaded into our system. So that's why they're able to get back a quote immediately. And that factors in drive miles to the airport from the airport at recovery and so forth. But I think specifically for them, their goal is always speed. And so they come to us because seconds after they place the order, they have their quote, they have the
Yeah.
flight that they're going to be on, that airway bill is already booked, and a driver's actively being solicited, hopefully very close to the hospital that they're picking up from.
Yeah, I
But
would imagine
as we
speed
push
and
through speed
reliability.
and reliability, and then when I mentioned like partnering with Chris and even actually Brennan in some cases now too, is as we moved into larger freights, we do larger aircraft parts, automotive parts, semiconductor parts. Those are areas they're in new geographies. They are being shopped for quotes. They still care about speed, and they care about speed of transit, but also speed of getting that quote back, as Chris mentioned at the beginning. So those are areas outside of our sort of direct customers that aren't shopping it necessarily.
Yeah.
These are areas where we're
Sure.
competing for each RFQ.
Okay, so my next victim here is Brennan O'Dowd. And so, Brennan, you've been in this for a long time. Give us a snapshot for those of us who are uninitiated. What does 7L do? And in the simplest terms, give us an idea.
I think the simplest terms is we're in rate management and then execution. So historically, we've taken a bunch of different formats of rates, put it into a platform, and kind of made it simple to quote. So you're able to put an origin destination, and then independent of the carrier's formats, you get everything returned the same way. So it makes it very easy to digest. A few years ago, we started going down more on the execution side. So we've got all these rates. You're seeing the carriers, and then you're able to purchase the transportation from the platform as well. And then everything associated with that, with the milestone statuses that are coming back, tracking, tracing, PODs, all that good stuff. But everything drives from that rate management and the diversity of carriers that most forwarders are using. Generally speaking, forwarders are using a bunch of different types of carriers, from pure cartage companies to middle mile that's going to be more density, to class-based LTL providers, to expedited ground, to courier and parcel, like where we're talking like FedEx and UPS on the integrators. So we've got all that stuff rolled into a single set of APIs for when we're talking about like integration or a single UI UX.
So, Brendan, back in the days when I was on the transactional side, for those of you who may not have known this, I'm a recovering freight forwarder myself. I used to have this huge book thing. I forgot what they call it. They used to put all the
Binder,
rates in. Yeah, that big binder thing. And I would get in the mail, or every day would come in, take this page out, put this page in, that type of thing. Do you still see that at freight forwarding offices, Brendan?
Yeah, we see a little bit, not too much. We're working with a lot of freight forwarders. I do like to collect the rate binders or Bibles, however you want to call it, from forwarders when they've found salvation in the rate management side of digitization. But look, I think in general, even if they're not using 7L, if they're using some sort of online quoting has been a thing. They're either going to all the different carriers directly to get their quotes, which
to
is
their websites,
highly inefficient.
Right?
And then now we're seeing a lot of like dynamic pricing, right? So there's not even rate sheets that are being issued or proffered from carriers at this point, that today's price and even 4 hours from now, the price is going to be different or distinct by carriers. Everything's really shifted in terms of how freight is being purchased and procured in general.
Yeah. So go ahead, Chris.
I would say, and the main issue is that everybody has competing priorities on that, right? On trying to, nobody has everything quite connected 100% across the globe. And it's a perfect point that you're talking about, right? It's where do you get the data, and how do you get everybody where they're really good to be competitive long term?
Yeah. So, Jeremy, from a freight forwarder's perspective, operationally, based on what Chris just said, Is there, in your view, multiple solutions and you tend to rely on one over the more so than others, but we're not seeing the panacea out there of just one-stop shopping? Is
Yeah. That's our magic, right? I'd say the art of freight forwarding is really interpreting all those different markets, all those different airlines, whether or not they're the cheapest, quickest, or the customer service when you actually want to tender or pick up the cargo, evaluating all that and then deciding what's best for the customer. It does come from a lot of places. I think everybody, just like our customers, have a preference on where we wish it would come from. Still
sure.
a bit old school where I love to get my airline reps just on the phone directly. Hey, how's it going? What favor can you do? Here's what we got
Right. I need a
going.
spot.
Yeah,
Yeah, because your customer is,
exactly.
yeah, it's a competitive situation.
But they're also competing priorities for them as they're trying to reduce costs and whatnot. And they're consolidating to online platforms. They're consolidating to the top five. And this is where, again, the community needs to really come together.
Yeah, but my members tell us all the time, it's hard to get a hold of an airline sales rep nowadays quickly. And
Right.
it's
Have them
just,
until you need them.
yeah, that those are just business decisions. And we communicate frequently with the airlines about that, but that's their business model now. And all right, let's talk about the evolution of AI and how it's proliferated in the forwarding industry, because you do have resistance, Chris, right? There are people, if you walked into my, maybe it's because I'm not on the transactional side, and that doesn't mean I wouldn't have progressed over the years and I wouldn't have gotten enlightened. But right now, if you walked into my office and you told me what you're about to do, I'd be a little nervous. You're looking at my emails. You want to do what? You want to answer my customer directly? I can trust you to do that. Do you hear that kind of thing from customers?
Yeah, definitely from the older school guys, for sure.
Of which I am one. Yeah.
But the reality of it is the information's out there already, right? Again, 7L or the other rate repositories out there have most of the data. On the ocean and truck side, there's a plethora of information. It's just on the air side, there's not a lot of data, right? That you can actually buy that's valid. And so people are accustomed to sharing data. Just on the air freight side, there's just not a good source for it yet.
Yeah. Okay. So, Brennan, I would basically classify 7L as an intelligent platform, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that differ from like a simple database?
I think in general, the complexity of rates and the methodology around how we're maintaining the data as well. Again, we're living in two worlds. We've got static rates that don't evolve as much until you book it, and then the carrier says, "Hey, no, that rate changed last week." But then you've also got the dynamic stuff that's changing at the moment of like booking effectively.
And you have trucking rates too, right? Trucking rates are on.
Trucking.
So
We've got some ocean on the LCL side as well. So we do a little bit of everything. We're not in the brokerage side of things on the full truck, so we're not a great source for that. I think there's substantially better products out there that'll get you your indexing on the brokerage side of things. But I think the key distinction between a simple database, I don't think there's a simple rate database. They're all pretty complex, but it's how you're leveraging the data and serving it. Then there also starts to become like one of the things when we talk to freight forwarders is even if they're fantastic at collecting their own data, storing their own data, digitizing their rates, they're limited to their rates and they don't get to see other carriers. And when they want to bring on a new provider, it's very difficult for them to bring them into the ecosphere versus being like, oh, this carrier's already in the system. We can just turn it on, see it, and then evaluate how it fits. So I think that's the big distinction. And then also just the sheer number of shipments that are moving through our platform. We did over 1 million air shipments last year, is that we're starting to gather a lot of data around what the average procured rates are. And that in and of itself has some downstream applications as well.
Massive.
Maybe a plug for 7L and probably Captain Cargo is just like the complexity. Airspace is one that we've tried to host our own. And if it's a single piece, it's non-DG, it's under 100 pounds, it's in the US, we got it nailed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We got it nailed. But
if it wasn't for those darn customers.
Yeah. But I mean, probably a number of folks on this call know this, a number of others might not, but like the moment you introduce a second piece, the big 4 airlines in the US, there's 3 different ways that they charge you for that. Whether it's the average of the 2 pieces, each piece, what it is and what weight bucket that falls into. It's Southwest, they just sum the 2 pieces and charge you that. Like all of this, like it immediately adds complexity that these folks are aggregating on behalf of forwarders throw DG into the mix, that complicates things. Is it
Yeah.
the same UN number or different UN numbers on that airway bill? And that's complicated. So I think the complexity really does just get exponential, and all that's just in the US. And then you go international and you've got 12-page documents on their accessorials and no consistent way that they're applying them. And so like I do think that there's real value in it. Is probably more nuanced than just a database, but also if they did just the database the right way, like that's value in and of itself, is what I would say.
And
Ben,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
huge
Go ahead,
one.
Chris.
we talk a lot, at least we talk internally a lot about the science of a freight forwarder and the process, and then also the art of growing your business, right? So a lot of the things that are out there, which are absolutely necessary and needed, it really focuses on, I have the shipment and what do I do next, right? So I have a shipment, what's the best rate? How do I process it? How do I get through customs? Blah, 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 which is extremely important. But we don't spend a lot of time on the art of how do I grow my business and how do I get more freight, right? And that's where I think we spend a lot of time on what we're trying to solve is how do we help you grow your business to compete at scale. And it's funny to me because 7L, for example, I've used them for well over a decade, maybe 15 years, maybe 20 years now. What Ben's doing is fantastic from a critical standpoint. Obviously, Jeremy and I are cut from the same cloth as the freight forwarder, but how do we get these all together to make sure that the community of the industry goes to the next level? And that's what I'm so excited about doing Captain Cargo, is because of just that. Is I think if we can figure out how to work together, we'll all be better off.
All right. But Chris, you and I know, we all know that this business is more than just quoting rates. If you've done your job, it's about that customer relationship. What's out there in these platforms that facilitate that aspect of the business's management?
So from a Captain Cargo perspective, we believe that it doesn't need to be Aircon as a consolidator within the shipment, because we want to give the power back to the freight forwarder to meet their customer needs and their desire to win that business. So for example, if I can give you all the rates in the world of AMI and AWA and UAC and all the different airlines and let you pick for your customer or have your customer pick, you have a better chance of winning that shipment. And then if you think of the other AI agents, yes, we're starting with quoting because it's just necessary. But if you look at
AI agents.
Yeah. So
what's that mean?
Think of a bot or a robot doing the actual automation. So there's AI agents and then there's co-pilot agents, right? Most of the tools that you see out there today are co-pilots, which I don't want to go into the pros and cons of that because that's a long story. But the third agent that we're doing is really the exception agent, which think about the need of the customer of when they need it, how much they're willing to pay. It's not always the fastest in air freight, right? It may be just faster than ocean, right? So you might want to be able to do it on a parcel carrier, for example, but giving that power back to the people that actually need it is really what I think is cool about what we're doing.
Jeremy, traditional forwarder, you've been around this for a while. How do you balance all this? How do you make sure that these automated agents or whatever you call them don't run roughshod over the personal?
I'll answer that, and even your previous statement about scaring people in the room with the new technology.
Yeah.
We're a firm believer that new technology, like any tool, really should enhance the experience when used right. It shouldn't replace anything. We don't buy a tool to then never think about that job again. Like Chris said, there, putting it in our hands faster is really advantageous to us. But just like you said, it's exactly that. We automated what made sense first. The biggest hurdle for me recently in the past couple of years has just been manual processes when getting successful. So when we get successful,
what? Give me an example. Like what?
Yeah, whether it's booking a big project or just having to write a bunch of airway bills or having to correct a bunch of airway bills or have to chase down a bunch of agents for rates. Did they tender? Is the cargo actually there? I'm getting different things online. There's a lot of different elements that could pile up randomly. And to be successful, any of these 10 things, these timeline events could explode. And to keep our customer service in good name, we try to stay on top ahead of these. So anytime we can get any sort of automation there, it really helps us. It helps us stay ahead and focus on those really custom issues where we do have to get a station manager on the phone or really find out a picture of the cargo.
Just to remind the audience, we're taking questions in the chat. So please make sure you feed questions there. But Ben, when you and I met one another, it's been 5 years or so. I remember my first impression was this guy's bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. Wait till he gets a dose of what's really like in this business. And because a lot of times you're herding cats, but at the time you were always very focused. To your credit, you were always very focused in this technology piece. I'm curious, 5 years into it, what have you learned? What have you seen what are the surprises and what do you think has helped from your approach? But what also are the surprises?
Yeah, I think good question. Probably if I would have started 10 years ago instead of 5 years ago, I think that I'd have even more gray hairs than I've started to get because of that. What I've seen purely by luck, right around the time I was joining, I think the airlines were standing up their own direct APIs, moving off of EDI onto API. And so that
All
that
right.
did
So
allow it.
anyway, to the dumb guys and me in the audience, what's an API?
Yeah,
Tell us
so
how that works.
think of API as like a true direct connection where EDI or Edifact is waiting on, Brendan can speak to this better than I can, but like it's waiting on other calls. Whereas if there's an API, the in our case, the forwarder in the airline can speak directly, our data can transmit immediately. And so an
So you
example of
build it, you build this API to
yeah, you
connect.
typically like both sides if it's done right. And this is where I guess the 10 years versus 5 years, it wasn't done right over 5 years ago. And frankly, it's still being stood up by many airlines is, and there goes Michelle brought in their application programming interface
Okay.
versus I think electronic data interchange for EDI. So
Spot on.
the ability for us to go to name the airline who has an API connection at the time of booking and say, we want this exact flight, here's the weight and dims, you have our rates loaded, and receive back a confirmed airway bill that's checked capacity, it's checked our rates and sent those back to us. That didn't even exist 5 years ago. I think Delta was the first to release it around the time that I started, and then the others have followed suit. I'll start by saying, like, on the airline side, like that's been great. When we went international, that's where it was like, okay, like these folks in general, and of course there's many more airlines, but they're various forms of behind. So then you go to folks like Brennan and Chris who are aggregating the best available, which maybe is EDI, maybe they do have an API, but we fly with them 5 times a month. So are we really going to invest in building an API directly with them when we could go to an aggregator? So I think on the airline side, I would say like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, that is still the case. I've seen so much progress with the airlines. And then I'll go airline drivers and customers. I think so on the driver side, that's something that we just knew others had tried, and getting a driver to run an app who's being asked to run all of the other apps that are out there. There's apps that
That's
are built just for drivers, right? There's companies that they build these and then they go to the mom and pop shop, they go to the big agents out there and they say, hey, we have this app that'll improve your operation. We're out here saying we have an app. And that was a real challenge. And so that led us to go the independent contractor route. We're going to go direct to drivers who aren't part of these agencies. And so that's been a really good benefit to us. And then again, now you go international and you're working more with forwarding partners, you're working with ground
right.
handling.
Overseas.
Yeah, like
And
GHAs aren't as important in terms of a tracking of a package in the US versus where they are internationally. So that just required us to adapt. That's the theme here, is just like international. That's maybe where some of the gray hairs are coming from. And I won't even talk about customs because that's not automated anywhere yet. But
yeah.
then the
All
customer
right.
side, the last piece, Brandon, is that's where it's just been, hey, we have this really nice portal that creates a great customer experience. You should use it. Duh. I've been sending an email in this template for 30 years with the incumbent, and why are you going to tell me to use a portal? So that's where, really, like, to bring it back to what Chris brought up in LLMs, that's where we've had to adapt and say, fine, send that email. Let us build something on our side to ingest the information in that email, hit our own API internally, and then create an order for you. And so I think, to summarize, maybe like still excited about what we've been able to do versus the focus, but at every single interaction, and again, I didn't talk about customs or ground handling agents or any other number of things, but there are challenges that I think the ultimate takeaway is like there's not going to be a single pill that the airlines, the customers, the drivers will all swallow to make it. So you have to adapt and you have to build things that can then support your
Well,
system.
sure. But okay. So Brennan and Chris, when someone uses your platforms, Are you building these APIs? By the way, Matthew Kretzman just posted something. Think of an API like a waiter at a restaurant. You, the app, place an order request. The waiter, the API, brings your order to the kitchen, the server, and then delivers the food response back to you. It's a layman's definition. I understand it. So that's a good thing. So are you guys building these APIs as a courtesy to your customers, or are you telling your customers, go out and find your own API to connect to our system?
So do you want to go first, Brennan, or you want me to go first?
Yeah, I think there's some different models. So one is like our connections to how we connect to carriers. My preference is the carrier has an API already established. We're going to integrate with them. We'll interpret their layers, bring it into our format, and unify it. Then my value add to our direct forwarders that are using us, or even third parties like Chris and his team, is that now we have a unified single API that they have to connect to, and they're getting to leverage the 150 plus continue to grow. And I talked to it a couple of years ago. We were 20, 30 APIs that we were supporting and maintaining downstream, and that's going to continue to grow. And so I think it really just depends on the situation when you have the conversation. Ideally, yeah, they can use the off-the-shelf API that we offer to them or serve to them. But at the same time, if we're serving them data, we're able to construct things in a unique way or hit their endpoints and push data to them versus them pull from us. So I think you got to take a consultative approach when you have the conversation, find out what the needs are, and then help steer them a little bit. Because sometimes I got to have this API and you're like, hold on, you actually don't. And this is what it should be. Being able just to help them down that path.
And real quick, just as a point of information, if I'm using one of the popular off-the-shelf TMS products, CargoWise or an AirTrack, or you know what I mean, the Magaias, whatever.
Yeah.
Are these APIs, if I want to interact with 7L or Captain Cargo, do you bolt on to these things?
Yeah. So from our standpoint, so we have a connection with 7L, right? Or Web Cargo. No, and then if our customers want to use 7L, we've already have that connection, and it's just really just having a key saying, okay, if you're a customer of 7L, we've already got it, you have it done, right? So there's no real time delay in those type of things. Where the difference comes in is, let's say they have 7L and a Cargo AI and a Cargo One and a whatever. We already have those connections. And so it's just using their keys to get their rates. And then we have our internal rates that we can also use that as a backstop. So if you don't have an access to it, let's say you're going to South Africa, for example, and you don't have a rate to South Africa, we have a wholesale network that also provides that rate. So again, trying to get everybody to understand what the options are. And again, freight forwarder making that connection. We're not trying to replace 7L or Cargo AI. It's like, how do we get everybody together? Like to Ben's case is, hey, how do you get more business? How do more people know about your time critical, really cool stuff that you're doing? How do we partner on that, right? And how do we get access or give more access to the customers that need it?
Okay.
Yeah,
so
I think one thing real quick too is ask the provider when you're talking to them, ask them who their list of integrations are. Those are built and it's off the shelf. Like we have a native integration, like the integration's done between 7L and Captain Cargo. So that it's done and it's built. We have native integrations with various TMSs. And so it's done, and there shouldn't be additional costs to connect the stuff. There shouldn't be build out costs. It should be pretty transparent about who their stable of carriers are, they're connected to, and to what extent too. So make sure you're asking that question when you're evaluating your providers.
Jeremy, what did you guys do? Do you have an off-the-shelf TMS, or is this something you developed?
We have an off-the-shelf TMS. Starting the new company, smaller, being an independent air carrier, that was easy. Getting into IATA, not as easy. So a partner like Aircon and Cargo AI was really beneficial. Like you said from the beginning of the meeting, it really let us compete off the get-go. We already had our relationships going, right? We had the cargo, we had the agents overseas, we had every other piece of it. We just had to combine that relationship experience with the new technology. So it was an easy pair up for me.
I'm curious for Chris and Brennan, what kind of pushback do you get when you sit down with a forwarder? Give us a sense. Go ahead.
So on our side, or at least on the Captain Cargo side, is we're not doing imports yet, right? So obviously 70% of Airfreight is imports into the US. We're not doing that yet. We expect that to be 30 to 45 days. We'll be able to do door-to-door quotes. But
the way things are going here in Washington, you probably won't even have to deal with that.
Oh, it's interesting is I find chaos in either geopolitical, tariffs, whatever, not to get political on it, but chaos is really good for freight forwarders, right?
Yep.
Because you have to have knowledge to support the shipper or consignee. And if as things move, now more value now goes to the freight forwarder because they have to have the knowledge. How do I move the freight? What are my options? What are all the carriers? Realize there's almost 100 air carriers around the world. There's
Yeah,
only
we
like
tell that
50.
to our members also. It's just that freight forwarders thrive in chaotic
That's right.
conditions. And
That's right.
we're the advisors. We can't
That's right.
control what's going to happen out of China or whatever. But yeah, you're right. So it's a good point. Brian, what do you encounter out there? You've been doing this for a long time. So I'm
Hey,
imagining.
whoa. Been doing a very
Not
appropriate
as
amount
long
of
as
time.
not as long
No.
as me.
So I think in general, what we're starting to see is that there's free platforms that are coming out for various segments of the industry. And so that's where we're a paid model, right? We're gonna pay a licensing fee to us to maintain your data, also secure your data, keep your data. I think there's some things, oh, and it's a free product. There should be some questions around like, where's that monetization or revenue coming from for that
Yeah,
provider?
what's your revenue model?
How are they making their money? And I think there's a place for the free models. And I think that's probably the main thing is we're starting to see for some freight forwarders that are small, hey, their data security, data privacy is not a big deal, and that's fine. And they're willing to say, hey, look, we're going to keep costs low on SaaS models right now. We're not going to subscribe to software. We're going to use some free products and it's going to work. Most of the free models are also going to be single segment, single mode of transportation. You're not getting an aggregation of multiple modes into the same platform at that point. And the carrier diversity is substantially smaller. I think that's going to change over time. We're going to continue to see more and more. And I think air freight in general is going to move the way of trucking as we saw it with 3PLs, where everybody's going to be aggregating against the same and shopping against quite a few different providers. But I think the freemium models are probably where we're seeing the most pushback today.
Okay.
That's a very good point because I think freight forwarders in generally are very cost conscious, right? I think the
Yeah, I
biggest
mean,
challenge is
they're out there killing each other over a penny a pound.
right.
You're right. I mean, there are
Right. No,
100,000 freight forwarders
100%.
out there.
But again, that's where I think the value in having the knowledge and or the options is again meeting the customer because it's not always about the rate. It could be the fact that I just need it here by Tuesday and I'm willing to pay, or I need it there now and I'm willing to pay more. So knowing
All
your
right.
customer is more important than the rate.
All right,
Yeah,
so let's talk about the
100%,
practical. Let's talk about the practical implementation and the measurable outcome side of this. I I guess Chris, I'll go to you. That from a change management perspective, what practices will help people achieve success when using your platform and others? Because I'm sure this is it's a mindset shift.
It is, and it goes back to how we started Captain Cargo in the first place, right? As we started a gateway as a service, a public gateway, if you will, for the freight forwarders. And the feedback we got was, Chris, I don't want to go to another platform, right? I already use 7L, I already use Cargo One, whatever, but they don't want to go to another platform. And so when we created this Captain Cargo, within the first 90 days, we improved our win percentage by 40% and we improved our revenue by 2.5x, right? Just because the speed to quote aspect of it. And that's when the light bulb went off. If it's helping us, we could absolutely help the industry, right? Speed to quote matters. And then obviously we went on from there. But that's the main thing is speed and letting the customer decide what's best for them.
Jeremy, where did you screw up at the beginning with all this? What would you do over again?
Oh, I always say I start things at the worst times. I've always broken it down to three things. Customers either want cost, speed, or service. One of those three usually reigns supreme in the purchasing decision there. And then it changes, right? That's why I think a tool like Captain Cargo, being able to evaluate all three of those kind of at the same time as a tool versus sorting your rate calculator to cheapest or sorting your rate calculator to fastest. While that is data, yes, it's good data. That's a tool, right? So you got to use that with your personal relationships, what you've done in the past, if you've booked that airline before, kind of move forward.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, you've got a technology background. Now you have a forwarder background, obviously, but where do you see companies making the big mistakes? Where are they dropping the ball now?
I think two parts of automating too quickly, maybe is how I would say it, is going after, if you're just starting on this journey as a forwarder, you've maybe only done basic stuff and are looking to build some sort of internal alignment behind automation, which can be scary for folks. I think a project that's too big out of the gates is one mistake, and I'll speak to that. And then fast forwarding all the way to full automation. So I think on the first one, it is all about the customer, and we religiously keep that focus, but also a happy operator is going to make a happier customer. So when we started automating things, we looked at, I should say, when we started automating things for the operator that weren't our initial core offering, like the quote, the route, the solicitation has happened. So like later, what doesn't an operator want to do? They probably want to make check calls on drivers. Or let's start with one that's more recent. Let's start with one going way back, like an email from a customer changing the address. No one wants to like receive that email. They probably have an important call that they're either putting on hold, hopefully not, or just letting ring off the hook. So can we automate the ingestion of that email and say, this is, we know what order number this is associated with. Can we just go update the order with that new address? And now the operator doesn't have to do that. And they see that they don't have to do that. And now they're doing less of these.
Now they're
emails
happy.
per day. They're happier. So
All right, but
solving something small for them that also
Okay.
is maybe large on the scale of annoyance to the operator, and like getting those wins and showing it to them. And the second point I'll just like couple in with that is like not going full automation. So what we typically do is we have a human in the loop element. So we'll automate something, and before we release it to be fully automated, we'll build it in a way that allows the operator to literally give it a thumbs up and then let it go on its way. And then we'll show them the data. Hey, over the last month, you guys gave a thumbs up to 99.9% of these changes, and this 0.1%, they said it was a mistake that they hit the thumbs down. And now we're comfortable. Now we have the internal buy-in to automate. So I think the mistakes are like shooting for way too big of an automation out of the gates, and then not bringing your operators along.
But something, Ben, it sounds great to me. It sounds wonderful, but that's within airspace. And forwarding you're depending on airlines and trucking companies and others who you have no equity stake in. You have if they don't have any quality control at Fred's Freight in Keokuk, Iowa, you're banking your future on that.
But here's an example of this, right? So I talk, we're VC backed. So I tell this story a lot of Milwaukee to London. Most freight forwarders will go Milwaukee, Chicago, London. Well, during the summer, British Airways may have 2 flights a week out of Cincinnati at 10% of the cost. Obviously, I'm exaggerating there. But part of the kind of the ML or the old school AI is that predictive or probability analytics behind it. So you, again, making a decision on, hey, if it's cheaper, direct flight out of Cincinnati, you can pick that freight forwarder, right? So if you do the combination of the ML AI and the LLM on speed and the response times, then you have a fluid product that your shipper and or consignee is happy with.
All right. So we have a question here that came in from the audience. How do we tackle those DAP? What's a DAP request?
Delivered at place.
Delivered at place.
Yeah. Delivered at place requests. Okay. Oh, is that an eco term?
Yep.
Yeah, it is. Okay. A few have brought this up. How do we tackle those DAP requests?
You can definitely tell your age. I think it used to be called DUP or something like that.
Oh, okay. They call it DAP now.
Yeah, it's now DAP.
Yeah, I gotta get up to speed on these things. Go ahead.
I think that's part of the challenge that we're trying to solve on having a wholesale network. So if you don't have your own agents or you don't have your own partner, how do you quote your customer timely and not waste a bunch of time?
Great question.
The reality is that each opportunity, if they're quoting, stereotypically turns into 50 to 60 quotes, right? From the origin all the way down to here. So the win percentages just aren't very good. And that's why the speed to quote on having a network, if you don't already have it set up, helps support that.
All right. So Michelle says I only have 5 minutes left. Michelle, I thought I had to 1:15 or 15 minutes past the hour, but that's okay.
I'll go over.
All right. All right.
Hey,
So go ahead. Go ahead. Someone's trying to talk.
Just because, Brendan, you keyed in on a really good point a moment ago of what we don't have control over. The airlines, they'll still fail to load the courier that's out there. That's exactly the point, in my opinion. I want to automate away everything else. I want to automate the stuff that is consistent so that my operators are spending 100% of their time on exactly what you said. I want them to be ready for the failure to load because they automated away the other 80% of the stuff that they don't need to be doing. What we say internally is I want our frontline team to be problem solvers and not button pushers. So you're spot on. We're never going to automate away someone's.
How are you going to automate Fred's Freight? How are you going to deal with that guy?
But I think that's exactly, Ben makes a great point where the automation is just getting rid of the noise so you can focus on the problem and not focus on the noise.
Exactly. Okay. So
But
I think,
I
go
also
ahead.
think with automation of Fred's Freight, that's like where we stand. Like there's value for us, and we're looking at creating platforms for those truckers, right? That's agnostic to a particular provider. We're connected to a ton of freight forwarders, ton of other carriers, and like finding that system that works well in the ecosphere of the interconnectivity, whether you're running a single truck, when you're starting to be able to transmit this stuff really easily into the larger, we'll call it the cloud, right? Of all this information, like that creates the automation. Because then when he scans that POD, he takes a picture just like the Amazon driver, right? Takes the picture at your doorstep. That can flow all the way automatically today, like into Ben's system, and then ultimately to his customer, right? And that's automated all the way through, even though they're a tiny trucker that doesn't have a ton of resources. I
So
think
I
there's
mean,
so much tech now that's available.
as I sit here, I feel like the forwarder, I feel like Rumpelstiltskin. I went to sleep 20 years
Yeah.
ago and I just woke up and I'm in my mind, I think about what it was like when I was in transactional side. I don't, we have a lot of members right now who are adopting this digital automated forwarder approach. And I think as I look at this, really what's happening is that you're taking the aspect of the business that is automatable. Is that a word? I think so.
Yeah.
And that's what you can manage. You're not going to manage Fred's Freight over in Keokuk. He's going to always be the wild card.
Yeah, but since the beginning, we've been inching towards this stuff, right? Even being able to dot matrix print out your master bills, right? That was cool. All the carbon copies that cut down time. Like we're incrementally addressing like some of these inefficiencies within it. But especially with the LLMs and all the stuff that we're doing, I'm so high on your human capital within your companies to manage
Yeah.
the exceptions and relationships. But that being said, like if you're not adopting technologies that are going to help you accelerate some of these tasks that we're doing, you're going to be struggling to keep up. And I think you're going to have relationships that are going to be there. But at some point, when Jeremy can come in and sell his services at a reduced cost because his labor cost per shipment is now only 50 cents, as opposed to, man, I got to have Fred like work this
All
thing
right.
and he's costing me 26 an hour.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
massive difference
Yeah.
in
You
terms
have
of
to
what travels.
automate. You kind of got to automate what makes sense to you personally. I think
Yeah.
you'll always have those sweetheart accounts or even those sweetheart vendors, to bring up Fred in Milwaukee there, where, to bring up your phrase, Ben, the human in the loop. And this is the best way to solve this solution. And that's exactly what we do as freight forwarders or anybody solving these situations, right? What is the best prescription for this? What combination of my tools can I do for this? Whether it's
So,
full automation, whether it's automation up until
right.
billing, and then I send them a nice letter and a card in the mail, whatever it is, and then we grow from that experience.
Yeah, it kind of
I'm
goes back to
curious,
what is your,
Jeremy, I'm curious, do you still have an Oki data printer in your office?
I don't. No,
Okay.
we when we have to print, it's almost an event. We have to go figure out like, some paper and make
All
sure there's
right.
nothing in the printer.
it's
Hey,
kind of like
Chris.
when you go back to your own, there's only so much money that a freight forwarder has, or we all have,
Yep.
right? And where do we want to spend our money? Do we want to spend it on relationships with our customers, or do we want to spend it on data entry? Right. That's
Yep.
really the way I look at it is, look, where you're still going to spend $100. Where are you going to spend it?
All right, guys, let's look at the future. Let's take out our crystal balls. Mine's in the shop,
Football time.
so you guys know better than I do. I'll start with you, Chris. Next 3 to 5 years, what are we looking at in terms of AI, in terms of what's going to be happening in freight forwarding?
Yeah, I think in the freight forwarding world, we're going to be able to predict, be more consistent with the airlines, more consistent with the truckers, because we will have more streamline of these carriers on what they are good at and what they want and what's important to them. So if they can get rid of their waste, they can focus on their priorities and what best fits them. And that's really what we're trying to facilitate.
So aside from using Captain Cargo, what should forwarders be doing to prepare for all this?
Definitely know their market, know their customer. I think that's the biggest thing is who is your customer and who are you trying to serve? Again, who's your master? I say this a lot too, is like, we can only have one master at a time. Our master is the freight forwarder. And as long as that is your mission and on point, I think we'll be moving in the right direction.
Okay, Brennan, no doubt. I usually go to you for technical stuff. You usually are the guy who explains things to me. So thank you for that. How do you see
Yeah, no
things
problem.
going forward?
I think in general, it's not the most Nostradamus answer here, but I think we're going to continue to see like deliberate, like incremental, like progression within the space. We're going to see more carriers that get more comfortable. The airlines are going to open up more services. It's not going to be like a big fell swoop where it's going to be, man, from 2026 to 27. I can't believe the difference between those 2 years in forwarding. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of the same stuff that we continue to, it's just going to continue to build.
Ben, what's your thought on this? If you're taking your crystal ball out?
Yep, I think the focus on shipper experience, our customers' experience, is just going to be, I think, the X factor for forwarders. So if I can drive rates down because my labor costs are low, and you can drive rates down because you're much bigger than I am, what's going to be the real differentiator is customer experience. So I think like how that relates to AI is just what I mentioned a moment ago. If I can automate away all of the noise and my team on the front line is jumping on every deviation or failure to load the moment that it happens, or they're on the side creating solutions for your more complex needs, like your more complex freight solutions, then I'm going to win on that customer experience point. So I think that's the direction all of this AI is going to take it, is who can create the best.
So thinking about the automation, connectivity, I sit on I chair the advisory board to CNS, and it's just, it's just a group of forwarders that sit and talk to CNS about some of their ideas, but the airlines are in the room, IATA's in the room. What should I be telling them right now about their state of connectivity now to the freight forwarders? How would you guys rate it from an ABC perspective?
At the risk of, I don't know who's on
Yeah,
there.
you don't have to mention. Let's not
Yeah.
mention any names. Just say
No, no.
generally speaking.
How about airlines are doing their part in keeping up, and I would love to see trade groups do the same.
I think that's a very
yeah.
good point, because the CNS, IATA, FIATA, these type of organizations really had an opportunity in my mind to help standardize these things, from the E-Airway bill to all these things. And it's just been too slow. And I don't know if it's analyst by paralysis or paralysis by analysis, whatever that saying is, but we have to move faster. As an industry, we have to respond to our customers faster.
Yeah. This is about speed. Time is money, and yeah.
And nobody does ocean. It's funny, is like all this tech is in ocean and trucking. Nobody does ocean because they want to do ocean. They do ocean because our clients require us to, right?
Yeah, because most of the freight moves on the ocean.
We don't make much ocean, but we don't make much money at it.
Yeah.
In the overall scheme of things, Airfreight's only 1% of global trade, yet it's 27% of the value. And it just blows my mind that people don't do air.
Yeah, and it's a value play, right? And so they're entitled to fast responsive information.
But it's not. But Airfreight's not just the moments, which a lot of people think of. Hey, it's a moment of I need it here for production. But there's a lot of supply chains are dependent on Airfreight, right? Down to corrugated. We moved 26. One of our customers moves 26 skids a week of corrugated out of the U.S. So it's not just electronics or equipment. It's all things move through supply chains.
Absolutely. On Airfreight. And absolutely.
Right?
With the pharmaceutical side of things, we've got members that haul rock band equipment, classic cars, all kinds of things move Airfreight.
Like you said at the beginning, we need the freight to get the rate, and we need more air freight to have more air freight. How many of those air freight trade lanes are based on just passenger destination travel points? If we could get cargo to drive more, that would be awesome.
I want to thank you guys for coming today. This has been an enlightening conversation. You certainly have enlightened me, which probably isn't saying much, but I've learned a few things today. And my takeaway is there are a few takeaways here that I want to that I would say to forwarders listening. Don't ignore automation. Don't do that. It's just because no matter what your niche is, someone's going to exploit it with a piece of automation that is probably going to usurp your kingdom shortly. So that's the first thing. But don't depend on automation completely as the other thing. You need an adult in the room checking things over. The other thing that I find just so enlightening is that we are entrusting automation to do the things that we found or we once thought most sacred. Reading my emails comes to play. And that's a big paradigm shift to me. And I think we need to encourage this conversation. And Chris, if you're willing to spend the dime on this, let's do this again, because I think this is good discussion. So once again, I'm Brandon Freed, Executive Director of the Air Forwarders Association. Michelle, thanks for your technical prowess today, monitoring questions. And thanks for the audience once again.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate everybody on the panel. Because I've enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Likewise. Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity. Cheers.
Cheers.
Appreciate you guys.